Hello,
Go.
boxing fans. Welcome to an episode of World Championship Boxing. And today we're talking about the greatest performances of Marvin Johnson. I am joined once again by Juan Silva. How you doing, man?
Hey, good afternoon, Logan. Good afternoon, boxing fans. As we talk on this Sunday afternoon, the world affected by the coronavirus, the biggest pandemic of my lifetime. Corona.
Anybody's lifetime.
Yes. Oh yeah. Well, we're living it, and everybody's living in our respective lifetimes. But while we deal with this crisis, we're giving you some classic content, and we're talking about one of the most underrated fighters in the history of boxing. He came along during the greatest era in the history of the light heavyweight division, and he is the first light heavyweight champion to win the world championship 3 times. The first man to win the light heavyweight championship 3 times. That's Marvin Johnson.
Man, what an aggressive attacker he is. Is he like the biggest pressure fighter of that division's ever seen?
It's funny. You can make a point that it was Victor Galindez, but he's even more aggressive than Galindez, as seen in their fight. Yes, I would have to say, in the history of the light heavyweight division, Marvin Johnson is probably the most aggressive world champion you've ever seen. I never thought about that. And everything came off that great right jab of his. It's not like he went in there full-blown throwing lefts and rights. Everything came off that thunderous right jab of his. Tremendous fighter. Came along during an era, the greatest light heavyweight era of all time. Look at the fighters that he had to compete against, and he fought all of them. Matthew Saad Muhammad.
He fought all of them well.
Eddie Mustafa Muhammad. Michael Spinks. The only one he didn't fight was Dwight Muhammad Quarry, Victor Galindez, and Marvin Johnson. 6 great champions in a 10-year period from 78 to 88. The only guy not in the International Boxing Hall of Fame of those 6 men is Marvin Johnson.
That's a shame, man.
Yes, it is.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know why. He's the first 3-time champion. He convincingly beat Galindez. He gave all those guys hell. In his 2 fights with Matthew Saad Muhammad, they were both Fight of the Year type candidates, fights that we both covered on our greatest fight series. He gave Michael Spinks hell until Michael Spinks almost killed him with a 1-punch knockout. He gave Eddie Mustafa Muhammad problems before Eddie Mustafa Muhammad knocked him out. He was a great fighter, and he deserves to be in the International Boxing Hall of Fame, and he won't anytime soon because, as I've mentioned several times in this program, that class has become very restrictive.
Okay, so let's talk about what these 3 fights are.
And all 3 fights are his title-winning fights. He's the first light heavyweight champion to win the title 3 times, and all 3 fights we'll be talking about were those 3 title-winning performances. First, from December 2nd, 1978, against it's not Mate Parloff, it's Mate Parloff, a former Olympic gold medalist, and he was at the time the WBC light heavyweight champion. Then we talk about his fight with WBA light heavyweight champion and one of the greatest Argentinian fighters of all time, a guy we talked about with his own greatest performances, Victor Galindez, November 30th, 1979. And finally, 7 years later, his fight against Leslie Stewart, who at that point in time was the WBA light heavyweight. No, actually, it was for the vacant WBA light heavyweight championship, a title that Michael Spinks had relinquished when he became the world heavyweight champion against Leslie Stewart, February 9th, 1986.
All right, and worth watching in these fights, even though he doesn't win it, is his fight with Spinks as well. But we'll talk about that. Tremendous
fight, and if I'm not mistaken, that might have been one of the fights we talked about in Michael Spinks' greatest performances. Yeah, he gave Spinks hell. That was, in my opinion, Michael Spinks' toughest fight at light heavyweight, because Michael Spinks was one of the greatest light heavyweights of all time, and he totally dominated that division.
He did. So let's talk about his early career. He went to the Olympics, right?
Marvin Johnson was an outstanding amateur boxer at 17 years old, and that's very hard to do in the United States. He was the National Golden Gloves champion at middleweight. He made the Olympic team in 1972 and took home a bronze at the tender age of 18. Turned pro, won his first 15 fights before fighting Matthew Franklin, who would later on become Matthew Saad Muhammad. July 26, 1977, Marvin Johnson was hit on all three scorecards when in the 12th round, Matthew Saad Muhammad in the 12th and final round came back and won with a spectacular 12th round knockout, ending Marvin Johnson's unbeaten streak. Then a year later, he would lose to the African champion, I never know how to say his name, Lati Mawali, an 8-round decision. Then after beating Jerry Celestine on September 15, 1978, he gets a shot at Mate Parlov December 2nd, 1978. Now, I remember seeing this fight. It was on NBC Sports World. I was watching this fight with my father, and my father had seen Marvin Johnson fight. He had never seen Parlov fight because Parlov was from Yugoslavia, and those fights weren't shown on television. So my father was like, well, unless Parlov's a master boxer, Marvin Johnson's going to beat the shit out of Parlov. And it's exactly what happened. This was a one-sided beating. Parlov had no business, even though he was the world champion, he should have just said, look, pay me now, here's the belt. Because he had nothing for Marvin. He ran and ran and ran, and he couldn't keep Marvin Johnson off him. That right jab of Marvin Johnson was a shotgun jab that kept sticking Parlov in his face. Parlov's right jab was just a jab that he pushed out there. You can't do that against Marvin Johnson.
He's an attack dog, man.
What I loved about Johnson in his fight, he attacked. He would go right jab, left hook to the body, right jab, left hook to the body. You know what's coming, and Parlov could do nothing to stop it.
So then he's setting him up for his left cross, right?
And he had a beautiful left cross, which he oh my God, yes, and he had Parlov up against the ropes the entire fight. He won every second of every minute of this fight. Finally, late in the 9th round, he finally drops Parlov, which I believe was a right hook. He drops Parlov late in the 9th round. Parlov gets up. Then in the 10th round, he drops him again. And finally, the referee says, look, it's over. It's over. A spectacular 10th round virtuoso performance by Marvin Johnson. A great performance. And Parlov would only fight a few more times before finally retiring. He was never the same after this fight, as we've always seen with these great fighters. When they give you a beating, your career is all but over.
Yeah, he should have just thrown in the towel the first round after he saw the beating he got in that round. That round was his worst round. He did better in each round after.
But he might have landed 30 punches the entire fight, because Marvin Johnson was not a great defensive fighter, but he was all up against Parlov. Parlov wasn't trying to throw punches. He was just trying to survive. He was running to survive, and he had no shot in the world. If they would have fought 100 times, he would have got knocked the F out.
Man, I wonder what somebody like a Holyfield would have done to this guy, because I think he would have a real hard time.
I think Holyfield would have beaten Marvin Johnson for one reason. Marvin Johnson's 5'11". Holyfield's 6'2". Holyfield has got one of the greatest chins in boxing history. Had Holyfield stayed at light heavyweight when he turned pro, he would have been possibly the greatest light heavyweight of all time. 6'2", 175 pounds, great jab, power in both hands. Remember, Holyfield knocked out heavyweights. Imagine the damage he would have done to light heavyweights.
Yeah. And it's true that we saw with Spinks that when you have somebody with a bigger reach, he can kind of tool around with.
Michael Spinks was 6'2.5", and
right.
he and Marvin, while he was able to get inside early, once Spinks was able to establish his jab and keep Marvin Johnson outside, he took over and then put him to sleep.
Right. So we probably see that in Spinks versus Holyfield. Not to get too far off track here, but
oh man, that would have been a great fight at any weight class.
Yeah, that would have been.
That would have
anyway.
been that would have been pick 'em fight because these two fighters knew how to win and they both had great chins. Take away Spinks' performance against Mike Tyson, he could have never beaten Tyson. That was him getting $15 million and just retiring. But Spinks against an Evander Holyfield, that would have been a legendary fight at any weight class.
All right, so after this fight, he wins the title, but then his next fight,
he goes straight to a rematch with Matthew Saad Muhammad, who's still Matthew Franklin at this time. He is because he doesn't change his name until after he beats Marvin Johnson in an 8-round war. This was one of the greatest fights of all time, a fight that we covered on the Greatest Fights in Boxing History podcast. He had Matthew Saad Muhammad out on his feet, but Muhammad, like he did in their first fight, came back and blitzed Marvin in the 8th round, knocking him out to win the WBC Light Heavyweight Championship and to begin a great reign that wound up putting Matthew Saad Muhammad into the International Boxing Hall of Fame.
So no shame losing to this guy. This guy is one of the all-time best.
And he could have easily won both fights. He was ahead in the first fight till he got knocked out late in the 12th and final round. And in this fight, I mean, as great a will that Marvin Johnson had, Matthew Saad Muhammad's will was even greater. And that's
amazing.
Testament. That's a testament to Matthew Saad Muhammad's greatness. Because you're fighting a bulldog like this guy, and you're able to overcome that bulldog. Oh my God!
So what did he do? What was his strategy?
Well, Matthew Saad Muhammad had a great jab, but I think the reason he won both fights, because in the first fight he was totally outfought till he came back and knocked out Marvin Johnson. It was basically Matthew Saad Muhammad using that great chin of his to overcome the punching power of Johnson and to knock out Johnson.
So it's just about him being aggressive
and having the bigger heart and the bigger will and the better chin.
Wow, this guy. I mean, because I look at him when I see him fight. I'm like, man, he'd give trouble to like Mike Tyson. This motherfucker. But we'll see.
No, because Tyson's a heavyweight. And in the history of the light heavyweight division, Marvin Johnson would have given trouble to any of the great light heavyweights. Roy Jones Jr., anybody. But I think Roy, in his prime, would have been smart to know, look, I'm not going to engage with this guy. I'm just going to stay outside and box and win a decision. The Roy Jones that lost a step, Marvin would have put him to sleep like Antonio Tarver and Glenn Johnson did, because once Roy lost a step, that's when his chin was susceptible, and that's when we found out he had no chin.
Yeah, so like a Calzaghe or a Andre Ward, they what would they do? Stay outside?
You know, they would have boxed, and I think they would have both beaten Marvin Johnson because they would have safely outboxed him. They wouldn't have engaged.
That's the secret. Well, anyway, so after he lost that, what happened?
Okay, he would fight one tune-up fight before getting a title shot against legendary Argentinian fighter Victor Galindez for Galindez's WBA title. And this fight was very similar
a war.
Fight against St. Parlov. Now, Victor Galindez was a brawler. He was no boxer, and he tried to box Marvin Johnson at first, and then he tried to rope-a-dope Marvin Johnson. That's not going to work. That's not going to work. Galindez did not have the punching power to keep Marvin Johnson off him. He was looking to try to weather the early storm, but Marvin never stopped attacking. Kept going after Galindez. This shows you the bravery of Marvin Johnson. Nobody ever attacked Victor Galindez. Before this fight, the only time Galindez lost was to guys that would box him from outside and make him look foolish. Johnson came after Galindez. Galindez tried to box. Galindez is not that quick. While Galindez did land some good shots, He was totally overwhelmed throughout the entire fight. Johnson was banging Galindez's body. Galindez is a great body puncher. You probably could count on one hand the number of body punches he landed against Johnson. Because you're not landing punches if you're backing up the whole time or you're laying up against the ropes. He was looking to get lucky or for Johnson to get tired. Didn't happen. Johnson kept attacking Galindez. Finally, at the beginning of the 11th round, Johnson lands a spectacular left cross. Galindez is spraying out. Referee doesn't even bother counting. Galindez had been the first two-time world light heavyweight champion. Marvin Johnson is now the second man to become a two-time light heavyweight champion by knocking out Galindez. Less than a year after this fight, Galindez would die in an automobile accident.
That's right. We talked about his greatest performances.
Right. We talked about that in his greatest performance. Yes.
So he was favored to win. Galindez was. And
a lot of people first Johnson took in his fight with Matthew Saad Muhammad might have affected it, but people must have to understand one thing. At this point in time, even though he looked 35, he was only 25. Marvin Johnson. Right. Marvin Johnson, I think when he was born, he was 15 years old because he looked old.
Let's just say he started losing his hair at 15.
Because Marvin was 25 and Galindez was 31, and Galindez was an old 31 because of all the wars he'd been in and because of the aggressive. If you notice, Logan, a lot of the aggressive fighters that we've talked about on this show, the brawlers, the sluggers, they have a short window in their prime. By the age of 30, 31, they're not the same fighter. You see it with you will see it with Marvin Johnson later in his career. You saw it with Galindez. You saw it with Mike Tyson, who was all but done by 30, 31. Aggressive fighters because of the way they fight. Joe Frazier, another perfect example, who was washed up by 31. Their time clock is ticking right away. And Galindez was 31 going on 51 the way he was fighting. Marvin Johnson, though he had already been in a few wars, was still only 25, and that's why my father and I at this time thought Galindez had no shot, and he did. The only shot he had was to land a big shot against Johnson, and only guys with one-punch knockout power, like a Saad Muhammad and a Spinks in Marvin Johnson's prime, were able to beat him. Galindez was more of an accumulator. He would accumulate punches before knocking you out. He wasn't going to do that backing up against Marvin Johnson. So
Marvin Johnson took the most punishment in the fights with Spinks and Saad Muhammad, right?
In both fights with Saad Muhammad, the first fight, Saad Muhammad took more punishment until he knocked out Johnson late in the fight. Johnson was way ahead on the scorecard. Second fight, it was a back-and-forth war, so they both took a lot of punishment.
And against Spinks, he took a lot of punishment.
Yeah,
obviously, he got knocked out.
He gave Spinks hell until Spinks knocked him out with that one shot.
Because I'm just thinking, because he's so aggressive, he probably doesn't get hit as much as a lot of fighters.
But depending on the type of fight, against guys that can move and throw a lot of punches, like a Saad Muhammad and a Michael Spinks, he's going to get hit and hit a lot.
His defenses are nothing. I mean, just his defense is offense.
His defense is his offense. And if he got you pinned against the ropes and you're not throwing punches, all right. But if you are a combination puncher like Saad and Spinks, he's going to get hit, and eventually he got knocked out.
Yeah, and he's throwing so many punches, too. He's able to hide a lot of dirty boxing, I noticed. He does some shit like holding and hitting and headbutts. And,
he did that all throughout the Galindez. But then again, Galindez was a notorious cheater his entire career. So I tit for tat.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay, so what's the after this? He lost it, right?
He lost the title right away. His first defense against another guy we talked about, another member of the International Box Hall of Fame. And it's funny, the first two times he loses the title to Matthew Franklin and then Eddie Gregory. As soon as both guys knock out Marvin Johnson, they both change their names and become members of the Nation of Islam.
Wow.
So he fights Eddie Gregory, and Eddie Gregory, one of the greatest counterpunchers in the history of the light heavyweight division. Very patient, but he's a counterpuncher. And Marvin Johnson is perfect for Eddie Gregory / Mustafa Muhammad because he's aggressive and his counterpunching will match perfectly with an aggressive style like a Marvin Johnson. Finally, in the 11th round, he puts Marvin Johnson to sleep. Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, now is his name, is the new WBA Light Heavyweight Championship, a title that he would lose less than a year later to Michael Spinks, which would begin Michael Spinks' historic 5-year run as the light heavyweight champion of the world.
And how easy was that fight for Spinks?
Oh, that was a tough fight. That first 10 rounds, I had it dead even. But then he closed Mustafa Muhammad's eye, and the last 5 rounds, he just beat the hell out of Mustafa Muhammad to win a unanimous decision.
Right on. So you're right, man. This is just a golden age here of this division.
And now, after 3 wins over bums, he gets to fight Michael Spinks, the winner to get a shot at Eddie Mustafa Muhammad. March 28, 1981, he fights Michael Spinks, the winner to get a shot at Eddie Mustafa Muhammad. He's trying to get a rematch with Muhammad, so he fights Michael Spinks. He's the number 1 and number 2 contender in the light heavyweight division for the WBA title. In the first 3 rounds, he's giving Spinks hell until he walks through a spectacular left hook that Marvin Johnson was out for a long time. Oh, my God. Oh, my. And Michael Spinks was always known for his right cross. This fight proved that he had a left hook as well because nobody knocks out Marvin Johnson with one shot like that. He put Marvin to sleep. After this
they
fight,
were showing this in the run up to the Tyson fight. They showed this. I remember.
Yeah, that was always because that was the biggest one-punch knockout win of Michael Spinks' career. I mean, that was just spectacular. While he knocked out a lot of fighters like heavyweight, that was the biggest knockout he ever accomplished and probably the most violent knockout of his career. Now, after getting knocked out by Michael Spinks, and the now 27-year-old Marvin Johnson went on an incredible 17-fight winning streak, but he could not get a shot at the title. Spinks did not give him a shot at the title. He tried to get a shot at the title against Michael Spinks, and despite the fact that he kept winning and he was beating everybody, he couldn't get a shot at Michael Spinks or Dwight Muhammad Quarry, the 2 champions. And then after Spinks beat Quarry in 1983, a fight that we covered on Michael Spinks' greatest performances of all time, Michael Spinks was the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, would not give Marvin Johnson a shot at the title. I don't think he was ducking Michael Spinks. I think it was more like, well, the guy gave me problems. He's a southpaw. I knocked him out.
There's nothing in it for him.
There's nothing in it for Spinks. It wasn't until Michael Spinks becomes heavyweight champion of the world that Marvin Johnson gets a shot at the vacant title, which will be the last fight we talk about in his greatest performances. February 9th, 1986, against the Trinidadian number 1 contender, Leslie Stewart.
Undefeated.
And this fight, Leslie Stewart was a very good fighter. He was number 1 contender for a reason. The light heavyweight division at that time, to be a number 1 contender, you had to be the goods. Well, the fight begins, and the fight is in Indianapolis, Indiana, Marvin Johnson's hometown. And today, Marvin Johnson, who's a former deputy sheriff in Indianapolis, still works in that office. So he's maintained a great career after retiring from boxing. Well, in this fight, with a raucous crowd of 10,000 people in the Market Square Arena, hometown of Marvin Johnson, Marvin jumps right on Stewart as soon as the bell rings, and first round, and he cuts Stewart, a cut that they could not stop. First 2 rounds, Marvin Johnson batted Stewart from pillar to post. He was just on top of Stewart. And this was a great strategy by Johnson, because Stewart's a boxer, and he doesn't want Stewart maintaining outside distance and keeping Johnson at the end of his jab. He's got to get inside, so he jumped on him. 3rd round was the first and only round where I actually saw Stewart actually landing from the outside combination. But after that
was
4th
it.
round, 5th round, round, fifth round, sixth round. Stewart is slugging with Johnson. He's not going to be able to offset him. He's not going to beat Johnson in a firefight. Johnson, right before the age of 32, is fighting to win his third title, and in the seventh round, Stewart is bleeding so badly, the referee stops the fight. Marvin Johnson becomes the first light heavyweight three-time world champion. And after defending the title successfully one time against Jean-Marie Emmerby, again in Indianapolis, he stops Emmerby in the 13th round. He gives Stewart a rematch, and finally, Father Time has caught up with Marvin Johnson. He's 33, but with that hairline and the amount of wars he's been in, he's more like 53. And this time, Stewart is able to outbox and just beat the hell out of Marvin Johnson. It's total different picture than their first fight. It's Stewart, he dominated Johnson, and after the 8th round, Johnson just said, fuck it, I'm not coming out my corner. Marvin Johnson quits on his stool and retires wisely, takes a job, deputy sheriff in Indiana, and after retiring as the deputy sheriff, he continues to work there to this day, and has had a very excellent post-fight career, considering the amount of wars he was in. And I think the reason being, Logan, was he knew when to quit. He was 33 years old. It was his first loss in 6 years. So it was time for him to retire. A tremendous career, 44 wins, 5 losses, during an era where you had all these great light heavyweight champions. He fought for them.
That's amazing. He really does belong in after all those great fights and just everything that he's done.
He's
winning the championship.
First three-time world lightweight champion. Gave Michael Spinks and Matthew Saad Muhammad their toughest fights. Beat up and put into pasture the great Victor Galindez. I mean, his resume speaks for itself.
Definitely. So what are some of the other fights that you would point to that you think people should watch?
Oh, definitely see his fight with Michael Spinks, because you see the hell he gave Michael Spinks before Michael Spinks put him out to pasture. Watch his fight with Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, because you see how he brought out the greatness of Eddie Mustafa Muhammad. That was Eddie Mustafa Muhammad's greatest performance, was his title victory over Marvin Johnson. Those are the fights. And watch the second fight with Leslie Stewart and see how Stewart learned from his mistakes in the first fight against Marvin and totally made sure not to make those mistakes and fought a great fight plan in outboxing and outclassing the ageless warrior. See his title defense against Jean-Marie Emmerby. I mean, Emmerby gave Johnson hell, and then Johnson just broke him down with body punches and power punches before the referee finally put a halt to the fight in the 13th round. And that was back in 1987, one of the last 15-round fights in the history of boxing.
And who would you liken him to in boxing history? Does he remind you of anyone?
You know, he's a lot like a Julio Cesar Chavez. He's a lot like those type of aggressive Gennady Golovkin, where he's a great body puncher, a very good to great jab, who doesn't just run in there. Everything comes off the jab, and once he's got you inside, he beats you to the body, and he could knock you out one shot like those guys were in their primes.
All right, well, that's a good, man. Another one of the books here. So, One Silva, man, what do we got next time?
And I think he was lying about his age, man. There's no way in the world that man was 25 years old.
Now, the hairline, but
that hairline, oh my God. It was definitely the hairline, because he was bald by 25. I mean, why even bother? He should have just shaved the shit. Now, by the time he fought Stewart the first time, he had shaved his head bald, but he should have shaved it. He should have shaved his head as soon as he got out the Olympics.
Yeah.
Oh man, there won't be any fight recaps anytime soon because the world has been shut down. The world is supposed to be shut down, so we're going to continue these great performances. And you won't be seeing any boxing anytime soon. We're going to do the greatest performances of another guy that I feel is wrongfully not in the International Boxing Hall of Fame. He belongs in. This great fighter from Africa. The man's name is Sumbu Kalambe. And if you never heard of him, after you hear our podcast and watch his YouTube fights, you want to read and see more of him.
All right. And is there a lot of him out there?
There's at least 7-8 fights of him on YouTube. He was a very great middleweight fighter from the 1980s to early 90s. And he gave Mike McCollum, the body snatcher, his first career loss in a masterful performance. Based on that performance alone, he belongs in the International Boxing Hall of Fame.
So
and
that will be one of them.
That is a no-brainer. And his title-winning fight against Iran Barkley, in which which showed a boxer keeping a brawler at bay with his boxing ability. So those will definitely be 2 fights. And you don't get no tougher than Iran Barkley. He made Iran Barkley look like a fool.
Damn, that's a monster right there. All right,
yes,
we're going to check that out. And we'll be back next week talking those fights. Thanks, Juan Silva.
All right, man. Stay. Keep your head
Quarantine.
Up. Keep everybody keep their head up. In New Yorkies, you gotta go. You go to the store. Make sure you get some exercise in. All right. Just don't go across the street to the store. Come back upstairs and feed y'all fat selves. All right.
Yeah.
I'm talking to
eat
my
healthy.
Well, not only that, but walk it off. Walk it off.
That's true.
You can walk. If you walk around the block 20 times, that's all you have to do. Do that, baby. That's what I did this morning. That's what I'm going to do after dinner tonight. All right. So there you go.
Sounds good.
Talk to you guys later. Big Logan, enjoy your week of solitary confinement, and we'll talk next week.
Peace, man. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hang in there.